Martin here with maritimegardening.com, and today we're not gardening, we're dealing with the results of the garden. And I've been asked to do a video on lacto-fermentation, fermenting vegetables and that sort of thing. So I thought I would start with probably one of the most well-known lacto-fermented foods, and that is sauerkraut. I didn't grow this cabbage. I don't grow cabbage in my garden. No one in my family is really too crazy, but I like sauerkraut, so I make myself some. I've got some here in the fridge that I made months ago, and it's still good, and I ate some the other day, and as long as you keep it refrigerated, it seems to keep quite a while, which is funny because I've bought it before in the grocery store, and here in Canada it tends to come in these little paper milk carton type things, and a couple weeks after you open it, it starts going all moldy and nasty, which is funny because this has been opened and closed a number of times, and it's still good. I mean, I ate some, I think 3 days ago, still here. It's kind of amazing stuff, this whole lacto-fermentation thing. So anyway, I'll explain it a bit as we go along here. But to start off, you need your basic ingredients if you're going to make sauerkraut. So I've got cabbage here, and you can make sauerkraut with just cabbage and salt and water. I like a little bit of onion with mine because it just makes the taste more complex, and I just enjoy it more. I find onions and garlic are like the pixie dust of the cooking world, kind of the same way if you add bacon to things, it makes everything taste better. If you add onion to certain things, it makes it taste better. If you add garlic to certain things, it tastes better. So I like a bit of onion in my sauerkraut. I'm going to do this all by hand. I think a lot of people you watch, they use machines for everything, and it's sort of off-putting to the casual viewer because they'll say, well, I don't have that equipment, so I can't do that thing. So I'm just using an 8-inch chef's knife here that I bought at a grocery store for like 25 bucks. Now I did have the edge reprofiled, so I went to a knife sharpening place and paid $5, and they changed the edge of this to make it incredibly sharp. It hasn't been sharpened for 2 years, other than to hone it on a steel like that, which I do every time I use it. So anyway, nice sharp knife. Right? So let's cut this guy up. And I'm not going to do this all in real time. I'll speed some of this stuff up, but just to give you a sense of that it's not an outrageous proposition to do this sort of thing by hand. Here's the heart of the cabbage. I'm making some soup today, so I'm just going to throw that in with the soup. There's the sort of rubbish part that will go in the compost. So we're just going to slice this up. When you're making sauerkraut, you want to save a couple big pieces like this, put them aside, and I'll show why in a bit, but so just remember that. Take a couple big pieces and put them aside. Don't cut them up. And then for the rest of it, you just want to cut that up as finely as you like it. So let's cut this thing up here, all right? I'll just move this aside. I have no formal culinary training. I worked in one restaurant for a month and they went out of business. I worked there as a busboy. I worked in another restaurant for a month and they went out of business. And I worked there as a, I guess you'd call it a prep cook. I've learned some basic knife skills there, but that's about it. I can't stress enough the importance of having a sharp knife. Make sure sharp knife is safer in the kitchen, but also much easier to use. forgot about my onion here. Let's cut this guy up too. I'm always amazed when you watch cooking shows and they'll talk about the proper way to cut an onion. And all this unbelievably overcomplication of how to cut an onion. Like it's the hardest thing to do in the world. And it isn't. I'm going to cut these in, I want like, sort of like long strips here. So, really not complicated. I don't really understand why all the discourse. Nothing could be simpler than cutting an onion. All these do this and then turn it this way and then do this other thing. And you don't need to do any of that, because if you cut it in a piece like this, the layers will break up, right? Oh. Anyway, so that was that part. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put some salt in here. For a quart jar like this, I find about 2 generous tablespoons is about what you want. So almost like a heaping tablespoon. Most of the salt, I mean, what's the salt doing? These onions and the cabbage is full of water. And for the sauerkraut, water has an affinity for salt, salt has an affinity for water. So the salt is going to draw the water out of the vegetable matter. So when you've got the finished product, the sauerkraut, if you're worried about your salt intake, most of the salt is in the water, not on the vegetable, right? The salt is in the water. So the salt's making the water a place that is suitable for a particular kind of bacteria, the kind of bacteria you want. It's not a favorable environment for the bad kinds of bacteria, the kind of bacteria you don't want. Moreover, the more of the good bacteria that you want that are in the environment, the less able the bad bacteria are to colonize that area, because the good bacteria sort of kick them out and run the show. So that's what you want. So now the next step, you've got your salt, you've got all your ingredients here in here. You've washed your hands twice, so they're super clean, on your fingernails and all that sort of stuff. There's fancy tools you can buy to do this, but your hands are excellent tools, and they don't cost anything, and they should last as long as you last. You just start moving this around, massaging it until liquid starts to come out of the cabbage and stuff. And that can take a while. That does not happen immediately. So you're sort of squeezing and massaging and working it. I think it take about 15 minutes or more, depending on how you go at it. Actually, this is starting to get quite wet already. I can feel the moisture being drawn out of that cabbage. Anyway, so you just keep doing this. I might even add a little bit more salt. You have to go by feel sometimes with these things. For a quart jar, it's recommended up to 3 tablespoons. I like everything salty. I don't have high blood pressure problems, so you know. But as I said, most of the salt goes into the water, the liquid. Anyway, you're just going to keep doing this. I'm going to turn the camera off. You're going to do this for about 10 or 15 minutes. Find something to watch on TV. Watch one of my gardening videos on YouTube while you do this if you want. Alright, back in a minute. Alright, so we're back here, and I'm massaging this for about 5 minutes, and it's gotten quite limp and very wet. Bring this a bit closer to the camera so you can see. It's got about the visible volume has gone down because it's become more limp, but it still has further to go. It really hasn't broken down to my satisfaction. I would say another 10 or 15 minutes are needed. I guess I didn't speak to the kind of salt I'm using. This is just ordinary pickling salt. It's the cheapest kind of salt you can buy. You'll see people on sign use Himalayan salt, use this, use that. I'm sure these things modify the flavor in certain ways. Most of them are imperceptible to me. The cabbage doesn't really care what kind of salt you put in there. If the cheap pickling, coarse pickling salt is the cheapest salt you can buy, and I use it in everything. And if you like the flavor of that, use that. Right? It just comes from a mine somewhere, as far as I know. That's all I'm using here, cheap coarse pickling salt. You can basically get a container this big for like $2 something. So it's very inexpensive and multi-purpose. They can use it anywhere. If you want to use it on your popcorn or your food, you just put it in a coffee grinder, make it like a fine powder. So it's very versatile. It's all I use in my house. You can put it in a pepper mill and grind it onto things. Sort of an ideal solution, or an ideal way to get good multi-purpose salt. One more thing. If it's the case that you don't have enough liquid coming out of this, not all cabbages are created equally. They don't all have the same moisture content. And it's quite likely the ones you buy in the store probably have a very low moisture content because they probably keep better that way. So if not enough moisture comes out of the cabbage for you to, such that when you pack it in the jar, the moisture should, cover. If that's not the case with yours, and it looks like that might be the case here, number one, more moisture will come out over time, especially when you've got a little weight on top of it. But even if that's the case, all you need to do is add a bit of salt and water. So the ratio is 1 cup of water to 1 tablespoon of salt. There's people just going out of their minds at all the salt I'm using here, but again, it's not going to make the cabbage any more or less salty. The cabbage will take up the salt it needs, and everything else will just remain in the water for the most part. Because we're using ratios of salt to water that aren't beyond the water's ability to take the salt, right? The water's not going to be saturated. A tablespoon of salt will dissolve into a cup of water. I'm just stirring this around so that it dissolves. There. Is it a cup? I'll double check that. It's close and pretty darn close. A little touch more there. Okay. I'm going to pause this. I'm going to do a little bit more massaging, see how much further I can get this, and then I'm just going to pack it in the jar. Alright, so I've done all the massaging and tossing and all that other stuff. In fact, I cut up the rest of that cabbage and put it in there as well, because as I kept working it, it kept getting smaller and smaller, and I was concerned it would not fill the jar. So I added a little bit more. So I used that whole cabbage. I still have these little pieces that I'll put on top, and you'll see why in a minute. That's a very important part of the process. So let's go about this process of filling the jar. So put my little funnel-y thing here. This is quite lit now. You can see we come in close here. It's very wet. I don't know if you can tell the difference, but it's it's dripping. Right? That's the water. That's the water, or the salt drawing the water out of the cabbage. Because salt has an incredible affinity for water. So all we're doing now is we're just putting this in. I'll put it in until it looks full, and then I'll push it down with a spoon. You got to keep compacting and compacting and compacting. And hopefully there's enough liquid that's been drawn out of this to cover. But if there isn't, we'll just add a bit of water and salt. And all you do is you add, for every cup of water, you add 1 tablespoon of salt. That's the ratio. Again, do not worry about it being salty. If you were to eat some of this cabbage right now, it would be very salty because the salt is on the cabbage. But the more it brines up and the more the solution becomes liquid, a good proportion of the salt will be in the brine. It'll be in the liquid. It will not be in the vegetable. It'll be on the vegetable, but not in the vegetable. If you can understand the difference, the cabbage will take on the salt it needs, no more. And I know there's boiling on the oven there. I know those people out there saying, "Oh, that's too much salt, 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 salt." You know, and if you've got a heart condition, you know, my sympathies for that. I don't, but I can say that if you have an active lifestyle and you're healthy, having salt in your diet doesn't really do anything. If you do enough to work up a good sweat every day, the salt will find its way out of you. But yeah, there's really nothing wrong with eating food that's been. This is the way prior to refrigeration and all the sort of all the modern conveniences we have today. Salting was really how everything was preserved. So there's nothing here I'm doing that hasn't been done for thousands of years. Salt is just this amazing thing. After this is sat long enough, there will be a juice here that can be used for other things. Pickling juice is it's a vinegar substitute. You can use it if you're making something like potato salad or something like that. You put the pickling juice in there, and then it'll do wonders for it. It's got a more complex flavor than just white vinegar, right? It's alive. Alright, so I'm going to work this down. There was I would say, half a cup of liquid in that bowl, all in. I'm just going to work this down with this spoon, which was sterilized. That said, that whole sterilization thing with something like this, I mean, I had a bowl with lettuce, I had my hands in it, and it was exposed to the air, and I was probably working away at this for the better part of half an hour. So the notion of sterilization in a process like this takes on a different kind of meaning. This is not a sterile environment. Everything that's in this jar was in this bowl, and I was sitting over there on the couch watching a documentary, rubbing it with my hands for about 20 minutes. So the idea of sterilization is a bit silly when you're talking about lacto-fermentation. Anyway, so there's that. That's worked down. Now I'm just going to push this down. Push. Try to get it down as tight as I can get it. All little bits and pieces. I want to get those down. I can see that the bottom 3 inches is pure liquid. Alright, so the liquid hasn't come up to the top here yet. So I've got some solution here. This is a cup of boiled water and a tablespoon of salt. Alright, so I'm adding this in here. Okay, now the water's up to the neck where I want it. Good. So all I had to do was add a cup of water. Not all cabbage are the same. Different cabbages have a different degree of moisture content. And over time, this will become more liquid as more and more of the water. There's still water inside the cabbage down here that the salts that are in the solution will continue to draw out. So over time, this will become more liquid. You want to get every little bit of matter down off the neck. You want your neck as clean as you can get it. And now here's where these come in, these pieces. And I rinse these with water. I put some water on them. You're going to put these on top here, and they're to hold everything down. You want everything that's fermenting to be below the water, right? You don't want anything above the water, because if it's above the water, it'll get this gross white stuff on it. It's not harmful in any way, but it's just gross. so you want to put something on here to sort of be a layer. I've heard people talking about using bread. That seems pretty gross to me. I find cabbage leaf is sort of like a perfect barrier, especially since we're using cabbage anyway. Right, so I'll put a couple of these in here like that. Put them in such a way that they sort of curl down, not up. A dome, right? You want it to be like a dome. Push. Hands are washed. Everything's submerged, and these are keeping everything down. And you put a nice rock on top. Inorganic, right? The rock is inorganic. That's what we're going for here. And little bits of stuff are going to float up to the top, and you pick them out. The rock's inorganic, so nothing's going to grow on the rock. There we go. That'll provide a good weight. Okay, so that's about right. There's maybe a 1/4 inch between the rock and the very surface of the water, maybe 1/8 of an inch, but it'll go down with weight. Now we're going to put our, mostly sterilized lid on top, like that. And we're just going to close that. I'm using my thumb and my pinky like that, just till it binds. We're not cranking it on, because this is going to build up. This is going to ferment, and there's going to be gases, and there's going to be positive pressure, and we want those to be out. So you want this closed so that things don't get in. But there's going to be slight positive pressure here, and there's going to be emanating gases out. Every day you come by, you just loosen it, tighten it back up. Loosen, tighten. And every time you loosen it, there'll be a bunch of bubbles here. And I'll catch that on film so you can see. So this video is not over, but for today, it's over. I've put everything in here. Everything's in a nice little brine, and I've set up a beautiful environment for this to ferment. I'm going to put it on the counter right here and leave it here for 7 days. And then after the 7 days, I'll put it in my fridge for about 2 weeks. I think things always taste better if you let them sit in cold for 2 weeks. You can eat it right away, but it's just better for me, from a flavor point of view, if it's been in the cold for a couple weeks. So anyway, so just tighten that, put it here. One final thing. You want that to be one final thing. You don't want the light getting at that. You want it to be in the dark. So just get a little cloth and put it over the jar. Nothing too sophisticated. If you have the wherewithal, put a post-it note on the jar and mark the date that you set it on your counter. Because if you've got more than one thing going on, then you might forget. And if you're absent-minded like me, you might forget what day you set it on the counter. I have found that any more than 7 days, it gets, the flavor doesn't really seem to appreciate beyond that. And some people might even like it less than that. Right now, the temperature up here on this floor, it's 19 degrees Celsius. So that's fine. You can, any sort of room temperature, 25, 20, whatever. For sauerkraut, I like cooler temperatures. I like making it in the fall. I don't like it too hot. For pickles, I find the summer temperatures, which works out well because that's when you're getting your pickles in August or maybe early September. It's warm in your house, it's 25 or more in your house. Those warm temperatures work fine for the fermentation process. But for cabbage, and you wouldn't really harvest cabbage till, fall anyway, late fall, at least in this part of the world. My house is more like 18, 19 on this floor. So that works out fine. So we'll put it here. I'll take a couple videos intermittently of me, what they call burping it. And so I'll loosen the lid and you'll see the gases come off. And we'll do that for the better part of the week. All right, so stay with me. See you in a few days.